And if you like the video or any other content on the channel, feel free to subscribe. Hey all, here's another list for the Adeptus Custodes shield host. I wanted to make something that was competitive but a little bit different than the normal Warden spam. I wanted to make the list with Trajan in it. I just had painted a Constantine Valdor model to proxy for Trajan Valoris. I wanted this list to have a lot of deadly options to be competitive, yet something different than that normal Warden spam list. This list is about constant pressure. We only have the one Wardens unit in this list, but we have multiple units of Custodian Guard. Overall game plan is to use Vigilant Eternal Stratagem, the one where you can use to sticky objectives, to allow us to keep moving up the board. Then when the opponent has to physically commit units to taking the objectives back, we drop 6-man bricks of Venatari down on them with Rapid Ingress. Use the Custodian Guard to push the enemy hard. The Venatari will be used a bit more like a counter punch in this game, rather than an enemy deployment zone or objective stealer. Now we will go through the important stratagems that benefit this list, with a list breakdown of every unit in the list, as well as a general game plan of how to use these units in the game. And the name of this list is On Golden Wings. And just like the Warden's Law, I do have two variations of this list. One of them all infantry, and one of them has the Caladius grav tanks if you do have access to them. First one we'll go over is the all infantry list. It is 2,000 points exactly. Our warlord is Trajan Valoris. For our battle line, we have 3 units of Custodian Guard. Our first unit has 3 sword and board and the Vexilla. Our second unit has 3 spears in the Vexilla, and the third unit has 4 spears. There's a little bit of variation in the loadout of these Custodian Guard. For our other data sheets, we have 5 Custodian Wardens, all of them with the spears and 1 Vexilla. Then we have 2 units of 6 Venatari, 5 lances, and 1 of them with the buckler, just to give one of those Venatari 4 wounds just for soaking some overwatch or some damage 3 shots. And then we have a unit of 3 Venatari, just all 3 lances on them, a unit of 4 Witch Seekers, and then for our allied units we have the Caladius Assassin and Kyria Draxus. Next, we'll go over the variant of the list that has the Caladius grav tanks in them. So it's 2,000 points exactly again. Our warlord is Trajan Valoris. We only have 2 Custodian Guard units this time, 3 with a sword and board, 1 with a Vexilla, and then 3 with spears, 1 with a Vexilla. Other data sheets, we have our 5 Custodian Wardens, 5 spears, 1 Vexilla, 6 Venatari with the 5 Venatari lances and the 1 Tarsus buckler for soaking that damage, 2 units of 3 Venatari, both with 3 lances, a unit of Witch Seekers, our 2 Caladius grav tanks with the Arachnus heavy blaze cannons, and then for our allied units we have a Caladius Assassin. Decided not to take Draxus this time. We'll see how that works in this list. Now we'll quickly go over the army rule and the detachment rule for the shield house. For our army rule for the Adeptus Custodes, it is called Martial Kata. Each time a unit from your army with this ability is selected to fight, select one of the Kata stances. Until that unit has finished making its attacks, the selected stance is active for it and it gains the relevant ability. We have the Dakastari stance. Melee weapons equipped by models in this unit have the Sustained Hits 1 ability. Then we have the Rendak stance. Melee weapons equipped by models in this unit have the Lethal Hits ability. And for the Martial Kata, we want to pick Sustained Hits 1 if we are wounding on 4s. If we're wounding on 5s, we want to select Lethal Hits. So it's pretty simple for that. The army rule allows us to be great into hordes or tough units in our combat phase. The detachment rule for the shield host is called Martial Mastery. At the start of the battle round, you can select one of the bullet points below. If you do so until the start of the next battle round, that bullet point effects apply. Each Adeptus Custodes model with the Martial Kata ability, melee weapons equipped by that model gain the critical hits on 5's ability. Or you could pick each Adeptus Custodes model with the Martial Kata ability, melee weapons equipped by that model gain 1 AP. I love this detachment rule. It allows even one custodian model to be a threat. If you're fighting horde units or a bunch of units with invulnerable saves, you want to choose critical hits on 5s just to get as many hits through as you can. If you're fighting units that do not have the invulnerable saves, choose extra AP 1 in melee just to help to get a little extra punch in our melee. Now we will focus on the stratagems from the shield host that will benefit this list. The first one is Arcane Genetic Alchemy for 1 CP, any phase just after mortal wounds have been allocated to an Adeptus Custodes model from your army, excluding Psychona models. Until the end of the phase, models in your unit have the 4+ Feel No Pain ability against mortal wounds. This is the stratagem we will use to help mitigate large amounts of mortal wounds. We will want to save it until we take a large amount of mortal wounds, so you don't want to use it for 2 or 3. You want to wait till you take a big pile of mortal wounds. Not a big pile, but 5 or 6. This can be used in any phase after mortal wounds have been allocated, allowing us to wait until we see how many mortal wounds have been taken on a unit before using this stratagem, making it much harder for the unit to bait this stratagem out of us. Like all stratagems in the Shield Host Detachment, Arcane Genetic Alchemy is only 1 CP, making it much easier to save a CP in the bag to help defend against mortal wounds. We will only have the 1 unit of Wardens in this list, so proper use of this stratagem is the most important since it will be our only way to protect against mortal wounds. We will only be able to use this stratagem once per phase. Still, any phase is very powerful. We can use it to protect from mortal wounds even in the opponent's Overwatch. The next stratagem is Archaeotech Munitions. In your shooting phase, 1 Adeptus Custodes unit from your army, excluding Psychona units that have not been selected to shoot this phase. Select either lethal hits or the sustained hits 1 ability. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in your unit have the selected ability. This stratagem is best used on a large unit of Alaris Terminators, but we have no Alaris Terminators in this list. Best target for the stratagem in this list is going to be Draxus with the Custodian Guard. Her psychic attack already has the sustained 2 ability, and sustained 1 does not stack. Her anti-infantry ranged weapon Dirge Singer would gain sustained 1, as would the Custodian Guard's ranged weapons as well. We can use this on our Caladius Grav tanks if we really need some extra damage, though with 4 shots on the Blaze Cannons we will be lucky to get many 6s on the hit roll. Thus we should only use this if we really need that chance of some extra long range damage. We can only use this on 1 unit per shooting phase. My target is going to be Draxus most of the time. And here is another one of our defensive stratagems. Unwavering Sentinels for 1 CP in the fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. 1 Adeptus Custodes infantry unit from your army, excluding Psychona units that is within range of an objective marker you control, and that was selected as a target of 1 or more of the attacking unit's attacks. Until the end of the phase, each time a melee attack targets a unit, subtract 1 from the hit roll. We can use this stratagem to help keep our units alive in the melee phase, although -1 to hit roll is not as powerful as it sounds. With all the rerolls to hit in the game, -1 to hit is not as powerful as the -1 to wound. It is great on our Trajan Wardens unit, increasing their already potent defense. The longer we can keep Trajan on the board, the more damage he will do, as well as draw enemy firepower to him. I still say a bit too many hoops to go through for this one. For -1 to hit, be on the objective, control that objective, it's a bit too much for -1 to the hit roll. With the old Unwavering Sentinels giving you fight first, I can see the hoops for that, but for this one, it should just be on the objective to get -1 to the hit roll. And we want to avoid losing models. Even 1 Custodian Guard can be a threat, making this stratagem still worth using it if we have the 1 CP and have met the stipulations of being on objective that we control. And here is one of the strong stratagems for us for the Shield Host. It is called Multi-Potentiality. For 1 CP in your movement phase, 1 Adeptus Custodes unit from your army that has fell back this phase. Until the end of your turn, that unit is eligible to shoot and declare a charge in a turn in which it fell back. This is a fantastic stratagem for us to have access to with such a hard-hitting combat army. With the Venatari having the Strike from the Skies ability, giving them the fallback and charge ability already, we will have to spend less overall CP on this stratagem, also making it harder for the opponent to tie up a lot of our army. The Trajan with Wardens units will love being able to fall back and charge and regain the fight's first ability from the charge. This stratagem will cause the opponents to second guess charging our units, because if they charge into us, we survive their attack, we get to attack back into them, and then in our turn we're going to use this stratagem to fall back, slam back into them to get fights first and hopefully mop them up. And here is a stratagem that will be quite important to the game plan of this list. Vigilance Eternal. For 1 CP in your movement phase, 1 Adeptus Custodes battle line unit from your army, excluding Psychona units within range of an objective marker you control. That objective marker remains under your control even if you have no models within range of it until your opponent controls it at the start or end of any turn. The only unit we can use this stratagem on is our Custodian Guard. For that reason, I did put multiple units of Custodian Guard in this list. We want to use this stratagem to take objectives and then keep pushing forward. We will always have a small number of units, making this stratagem well worth for 1 CP to keep all our units in play for the whole game. We do not want our expensive units standing on objectives all game with 0 threats. Even more so late game when the unit number is even lower could be the difference between holding an objective and then going to do an action to get enough points for the win, or being stuck on that objective and losing by 2 or 3 points because you couldn't leave that objective. And this is a stratagem I want to be using every chance I get, forcing the opponents into me because they have to come take those objectives physically, opening up spots for a Golden Wings of Death Venatari to rapid ingress into. And next in our units coverage, my boy Trajan Valoris with his 5 Wardens. We could switch Trajan with a shield captain. I wanted a list with my boy Trajan though. Trajan is a huge threat in the shield host detachment. Attaching him to a Warden's unit should keep him on the board longer than if he was with some Custodian Guard. The Custodian Guard unit would give Trajan the reroll wound roll if they were on objective they controlled. I still would rather the overall toughness of the Wardens with Trajan in this list. We can use Trajan's Moment Shackle to give him a 2-up invulnerable save for the phase, which could be an option with Martial Mastery crits on 5s paired with the Dacatari stance for sustained 1 can make Trajan into a big threat just by himself. Making keeping Trajan alive instead of going on the offensive is a valid option. Speaking of offense, we could use Moment Shackle to double Trajan's attack. 12 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 10, AP 2 with damage 3. Martial Mastery with the Martial Kata can make Trajan into a gigantic threat to any unit on the board. The Captain's general ability is a shadow of its former self, now only giving Trajan's unit ignore modifiers to the ballistic or weapon skill or to the hit roll. And next up is one of my favorite units. She is only in the infantry variant of the list, but I still really enjoy her. One of the best unit combinations we have access to, Draxus has some very potent shooting, combined with the Custodian Guard's abilities to reroll wounds on objectives that the Custodians control, along with the shoot twice once per game. Draxus becomes an anti-infantry monster for us. Custodian Guard are the only unit we have access that can use the Vigilance Eternal. The sticky objective stratagem will allow us to be much more aggressive off the objectives. Arcane Genetic Alchemy makes the Custodian Guard tougher for the points, while Martial Mastery makes them much more deadly, with the reroll 1s or reroll all if they're on an objective we control. Archaeotech Munitions is a great stratagem for 1 CP to help make this unit's shooting even more potent with either sustained 1 or lethal hits. If I'm shooting into infantry units, we want the sustained 1 to try to get more hits with her anti-infantry Dirge Singer weapon. If you have to shoot into a vehicle, you want to take the lethal hits. Next up, we have the Calidus Assassin. This is still a great unit for getting secondary scoring. She can return to reserves at the end of the opponent's turn, only to deep strike back down in the movement phase of our turn. The lone op ability makes it much harder to stop her from doing the complete at the end of the opponent's turn secondary objectives. We can use her to drain enemy CP or stop stratagems from being used at all. No longer is she only a scoring or utility piece. The Calidus Assassin can be used to help our army to be much more aggressive without worrying about opponent's stratagems if we place her in the right positions. For some examples here, you're going to shoot an Imperial or a Chaos vehicle. They have the 1 CP saved up for Armor of Content to make our grav tanks much less potent. Drop her within 12 inches of those targets. Armor of Content now costs 2 CP, and the opponent can no longer afford it. If the opponent has 1 CP, she becomes so much better. Worried about an Overwatch or some fight on death stratagem against one of our units? No problem. You drop her within 12 inches of the target. They can't use those stratagems anymore. You charge and fight away. Caladius Grav Tanks. These are our best options for range anti-tank shooting. 4 shots each, lethal hits when targeting monsters or vehicles, hitting on 2s, strength 12, AP 3, damage D6 plus 2, twin linked. Very reliable platform for dealing range damage. Quite hard to kill with a 2-up save, 5-up invulnerable, T11 with 14 wounds. It is a great unit to sit in our backfield, dealing damage and screening our home objective. We want to deploy these behind cover. Unless the opponent has very little range firepower, we do not want to use these as a bully unit. They only have the 1 threatening gun. We want to play them like a sniper, use them to take out important targets, not to sit them out in the open and dare opponents to come out for a shooting fight. Think of them like a sniper unit when you're using them. Now the Venatari. These units are amazing for the current price. 165 for 3, giving us 15 attacks, hitting on 2+, strength 7, AP 2, damage 2 with lance. Add in the martial mastery for an extra AP 1 or critical hits on 5s and melee. Then either the sustained hits 1 or lethal hits in melee from the martial Katala army rule. These things blend infantry and do a heavy damage to even the toughest vehicles in the game. The unit of 6 Venatari will have 25 attacks. One model has the Tarsus Buckler and the Kinetic Destroyer. To have a model with 4 wounds, a model so I can tank 2 damage 3 shots or 4 damage from an Overwatch. We will have all of these Venatari units in Deep Strike in this list to have the threat of these extremely dangerous units in our opponent's head. All 3 units in the same phase with swooping dive, since it states the rapid ingress stratagem by name, making this unit even more dangerous. We can even bait threatening units into areas where we can rapid ingress down in them, maybe make an obvious charge open to try to get a big group of something to charge into, maybe some sisters or maybe the Wardens unit just to pop the 4 for no pain, rapid ingress 6 of these Venatari down, and then charge them next turn just to tear them to pieces. And this unit will blend all but the toughest units in the game when in the Shield Host Detachment. The last unit we have to talk about is the Witch Seekers. This unit will have 2 different jobs depending on the opponent's list. We could put this cheap 50-point unit on our home objective to hold the objective with a small Overwatch threat from those Torrent Flamer weapons. For the most part though, with so many Custodian Guard units, I would like to put one of the Custodian Guard units on the home objective to sticky the objective with Vigilance Eternal, or if the opponent does have a large amount of deep strike threat, to stay and guard the home objective, leaving the Witch Seekers to scope 6 ahead towards the middle, or an objective for some early game scoring, as well as a screening or all game secondary scoring unit. The game plan for this list is going to be pressure. We want to be sticking objectives as much as we can with our Custodian Guard and then pushing forward. We want to make the opponents make mistakes, allowing our Venatari to drop down in very precarious positions for the opponent, push in and do a lot of damage. Because this is not going to be an army that we stand around objectives with Wardens. We're going to be pushing aggressive. We're going to be trying to do as much damage as we can just to try to score as much points as we can, cripple the opponent's army, and then run around and do secondaries. Now for some final thoughts. This list might not be the normal list full of Wardens, nor quite as effective. I do believe that it has all the tools to win games though. It will be a very different playstyle without the multiple Warden units. The list, especially the all infantry list, movement and target priority will be very important. We cannot lose whole units in the shooting phase before they get to do anything in the game. I will play this list or possibly an even heavier Custodian Guard list. I am curious if going for the most hard-hitting melee list possible could be a viable way of playing all aggression. It would be very skill intensive with very little damage mitigation coming from the detachment or the data sheets. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed building lists, even more fun with the wacky list. I like to have a theme or overall idea for my list of what I want them to look like or want them to do. Once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by.